Welcome to this session on student agency in small schools. My name is Alison Stark and I have the pleasure of representing the Intentionally Small Schools Special Interest Group at ECIS. In a small school, we have an extraordinary opportunity to know our students and community deeply. And with that comes a powerful responsibility to give our students greater agency over their learning and leadership. Today, we're going to explore what that can look like in practice. We're fortunate to have two speakers from Belong Hub with us, Rachael and Mustafa. They bring valuable insights into student leadership and how we, as educators, can help students take leadership and ownership over their journeys. Here's what to expect in the next hour or so. We'll start with a plenary session introducing Belong Hub and their work. Then we'll move into two interactive breakout sessions where we'll first brainstorm some challenges and then generate some solutions, stepping into the roles of both the students and the faculty. Finally, we'll come back together to share key takeaways and to connect today's learning to long-term student agency development. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Rachael from Belong Hub. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alison. I really appreciate that really clear introduction, and Mustafa and I are very happy to be here. I'm going to start off by sharing our slideshow because I always feel like it is helpful when people can see what we are talking about. Oops. Excuse me, I spend a lot of my time on Google Meets, and so it's always funny when you pop back and forth. But we are Belong Hub, and we are here to talk with you, as Alison just said, about building student agency. And we're excited that as many people have arrived because this is an incredibly important topic. How are we giving students a sense that they belong in their schools because they have agency there? But it's also important to know who everyone is. So if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, just very briefly, where your name and where you're here from. I am joining you from right outside of Washington, D.C., where we're starting to see a little spring. And it's going to get up to almost 15 or 16 degrees today. So Mustafa is joining us from Helsinki. Mustafa, what's the weather there today?
It's very sunny, but it's like a 5-6. For us, it's like spring, so it's good.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're from, your name, where you're from, and what's your weather today? Something that always connects us. Nice. We've got some Venezuela, the Netherlands, Stuttgart, where people might be going for the ECIS conference soon, Frankfurt. So you can continue in the chat, but I'm going to introduce us. Look at me. I'm going through sorry, going in the wrong direction. Here we go.
No, you are going.
I know I'm going backwards. Give me a moment. Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, come on. Excuse me. Let me go to the beginning. Here we go. And there we go. So I'm Rachael, and as I'm the CEO and co-founder of Belong Hub, where we are exploring how to use design and leadership frameworks to give everyone a voice in their school. And I come to this work with 20 plus years experience in transformational learning experiences. I really believe that every learner has the opportunity to figure out what their strengths are and connect those to the community. And this is what gives me passion and excitement to spread this understanding to other people. I was most recently at the International School of Helsinki for 7 years, where I oversaw student leadership and advisory. And a lot of the work that Mustafa and I have developed has come through some of the co-creation with other educators and students around how to bring voice to everyone. Mustafa?
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm a multidisciplinary designer. with experience in Europe and Middle East. My passion lies in creating innovative designs that drive change, meaningful change, and social impact. Over the past 4 or 5 years, I have been focusing on social and service design, where I develop tools and processes that empower people to connect in various aspects of life, like it could be work, home, or even at school. Yeah, that's what I like to do.
And so through Belong Hub, we've been exploring this visionary question. What if every learner felt that they truly belonged? And this question really dovetails with the concept of student agency, because we know through the science of belonging that people feel belonging when they're validated, when they have a role, and they see themselves reflected in the community space, or in our schools, the learning space. What we're going to do today is we're going to rely on your expertise and your interest in student agency. Everything we do at Belong Hub doesn't only lead to more belonging, but it models it. So we co-create. Co-creation is in our DNA. And we're going to be using tools from our student leadership kit. And so this kit is available to schools to use in multiple different ways. You could use it with advisory groups, you can use it with student leadership, you could even use it with strategic planning. So it's integrating many voices in order to bring people into conversations about how can we make our cultures better for everyone. And the student leadership begins with connection. So I wish we had had more time for connection today. We did a little dive into it, sharing where you're from. But certainly we all know relationship and connection is really important. And then we move into the design phase, which is kind of building empathy and understanding issues in our communities. And we call that everyone's voice. And we guide users through gathering student perspectives. Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on two parts of our student leadership kit: what needs to be done, where we're pinpointing key community needs. In this case, what needs to be done to build more agency. But we're going to not run the entire workshop for that. Instead, we're going to just ask for your knowledge, and you're going to bring it to the next problem solving brainstorming workshop, which is what we can do. And this is how we're going to develop some solutions and have some fun together. And then we'll explain what in our student leadership kit, how we take some of those solutions and help students and teachers work together to really make a change in their community. So as you can see, we're moving into the what needs to be done workshop that we'll start with. This is just, I wish we had more time with you all and we would really develop this as we would co-create if we were at your school, if you were using our student leadership kit. But instead today, we're just going to move into breakout rooms and you're going to come up with some of your ideas. And then we'll give a whole 15 minutes to really define some ideas around what we can do to meet those needs. We're hoping that by the end of our session today, you will leave with some new ideas from your colleagues, some new perspectives, and some ideas about how to co-create solutions with other people in the community.
Yeah, our core principles are service design and co-creation. Together they help create like a real change and in schools. So through service design, we make a process smoother to solve challenges. But with co-creation, we ensure that everyone, students, teachers, and leaders, works together to build solutions and take ownership. This way, we don't just fix problem, but we create a culture where everybody feels like they belong and they are valued. And of course, we are giving voice to everybody and getting different perspectives.
So we're going to start off with needs to be done. Like I said, if we were with you, this would be a whole hour-long workshop in which we would walk through different things that you believe could change the community toward having greater agency. But instead, what we're going to have you do is you're going to get into a breakout room with a random collection of people. You can introduce yourself first. And we want you to share your ideas for what you think needs to be done to improve student agency in small schools. For example, we need students and teachers to collaborate. So what is a need that you think needs to be addressed in order to create more student agency? What we're going to have you do is Abby is going to share out into the chats as soon as you get into breakout rooms this collaborative document. So you will each have access to this document. And right next to your breakout room, so if you're in breakout room 3, if you could please write your what needs to be done here in this box. And the reason we're having you write it there in that box is we're actually going to use these ideas that you contribute for our next workshop. So we will give you 5 minutes. You will be in a breakout room. You will have these directions, and you will come up with a need that you all agree in your groups should be addressed to build student agency. But before we go out to the breakout rooms, does anyone have a question or concern or could use further directions on that? Beautiful. Well, then we will give you that 5 minutes. We'll send out a 1-minute warning just so you make sure you have that response before the end of it and enjoy getting to know the other people. Well, thank you. I know that 5 minutes really did not do that job justice. And so it was interesting on the outside here to be able to see the typing that was going on. And I appreciate you all jumping in to collaboratively work together. I hope you were able to have the beginning of some interesting discussions about some of the needs that schools need to address, particularly intentionally small schools, to build student agency. The next element of the workshop will give you a little bit more time. Doesn't have to be quite so rushed. So in the new breakout room, we're going to reconfigure you. And we're going to have a little bit of fun here. So we have actually, I'm going to go back to this, this slide, and we're going to look at what you all created. So one group talks about how one of our needs is that we need to get student voice into the curriculum. Or we need to get student voice into a larger school issues so that students really see their perspective represented. So I would say that those are actually kind of two different needs. And as groups move into the next part of the workshop, address one of those two needs, whichever one that you would prefer. The second one, systems thinking. We need to intentionally schedule and shape curriculum to build in student voice opportunities. So this one is really talking about how we need to schedule, and we need to change the schedule for student voice opportunities. And I'm going to show you what you'll do with these beautiful ideas. Thank you for your thoughtful reflections. What you will do now is you're going to get into new breakout rooms, and we're going to give you a luxurious 15 minutes to brainstorm some solutions for one of the needs you identified. The odd numbered rooms, so we're going to have 4 different breakout rooms. We're going to make your groups smaller in half. And the odd numbered rooms, you all are going to represent whoever you are in the school. So if you join us today as an administrator or a teacher or some other role, you'll represent that role. You get to be yourself. The even numbered rooms, rather, you're going to put your student hat on. So you can think about one of the students you've worked with in the past, who maybe is somebody who does have a lot of agency, or maybe you're thinking through the perspective and the lens of somebody who really doesn't show that they have a lot of voice in the community and agency. And I want you to try to focus in on their perspective for ways that we could make a change here. And what you're going to do is you're going to go through a protocol. And the protocol works like this. You will have your need to be done. So for instance, we had talked about we need to change the schedule to give more opportunities for student leadership or student voice. We want you to begin by reframing that challenge as a how might we question. So how might we help more students feel included in school activities is our example here, because of course we didn't know what you were going to come up with. But in this case, it would be, how might we help more students create different opportunities in the schedule to give students voice, and then generate a lot of how might we questions. How might we create a block every day? How might we, and keep going, think big. This one is about really being generative. You'll have 5 minutes in your group. And if one person could be the scribe, that would be really useful, though you'll all have opportunities. I mean, you'll all have access to the document to write into it. Then you'll take 3 of your favorite how might we questions and move into can we's. And you'll have another 5 minutes to do that. So these are really about, excuse me, the can we's are really about checking what could work. You know, can we actually do this? As you brainstorm, think about what's realistic and what would be impactful. And then finally, take 3 of your best can we questions and move them into this last protocol, we can. And these are where you recognize what are the actionable ideas that you could start bringing into your school right now. Maybe around scheduling, around making sure student in this particular need, that you could actually start to think about, we could begin these today. These are projects that are realizable. And so that's what your protocol is going to be. You're going to head into the, sorry about that. You're going to head into the space together, and Abby will send you the exactly what the document is that you're working on, and it walks you through the different stages of the workshop. Does anybody have any questions before we send you off into those spaces? Excellent. Abby, could you maybe do the honors of sending people into their collaborative workspaces with their document?
They've got 30 seconds to come back.
So it's too complicated. Oh, they are closing, so I can't.
So welcome back, everybody. We hope that that was enough time to give you some opportunities to brainstorm some solutions. And what we would like to do is give each group, there were 3 rooms, and we want to give each group the floor so that they can share some of the solutions that they were brainstorming through the What We Can Do workshop. So it doesn't matter to us which room goes first, and we've given you all screen sharing. So I will stop sharing. And if it would be helpful for you to share the document that you created together so that you can walk through some of the solutions you came, that would be wonderful. If you would prefer to just verbally share and talk about some of the solutions you were coming up with, again, I think we will all find value in hearing some of the conversations that were happening across these discussions, focusing in on small schools and some of the same issues that many of you consider and seek solutions for. So is there a group that would be willing and able to begin?
I can jump in for, I think we were group one. We weren't able to get the document. I know it was shared through an announcement, but we weren't able to click on it on time. And so, but luckily Sean was able to get a screenshot of it early on the document, and we looked at it there. But unfortunately, it was like minutes. 15 minutes went by so quickly. And I think, about minute 13 is when we actually started getting to the brainstorming idea. But one of the things that we kind of talked about in our journey of discussion was talking about student agency, student voice. How do we get that in place? And I think where we arrived, there were 3 of us in our group. One of us is an upper school person. The other person, myself, was preschool to grade 8, and then Owen, who is primary. And so we talked about how easy it was to get student voice and agency in the upper grades. But then Owen was saying, and I would say for myself, I do it quite a bit through 5th or 8th grade, but I don't do enough 4th grade and below. And so kind of our question was, how can we, or how might we be able to give our younger kids more student choice, more voice, and things like that. And I think where we arrived just before we were pulled out of the room was you can easily scaffold some of this stuff. And so we were saying, can we, instead of just open things up and say, how might we redesign the playground, which is just, it's way too big for an 8 or 9-year-old to think about, but perhaps we can scaffold and say, here's 3 examples of what we can do. Which one do you like best? Or, just really giving them the choice, but within a contained environment. And so that's where we ended up just thinking about. But I think we'd like to continue talking more about how to foster student voice and agency with our younger kids.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciate how this question is the same in some respects, regardless of if we're looking at the younger kids or the older kids. But as we focus in, we can develop solutions that are particularly geared. And so that's one of the powers of this protocol. The more you come up with ideas, and I love the idea you came up with the playground. What a vehicle for students to feel ownership and excited when they see themselves reflected in that. And also the opportunity when we're thinking about inclusivity, how do we make sure everyone has a space in that playground? And so even asking kids to use some of these protocols, even the younger ones, to say, how might we make sure everyone has a place in that playground? Here are 3 designs if that's what we're looking to generate, if we're looking to make them stewards of an inclusive community. How could they ask some questions around the different designs to really be thinking with their whole community lens? And what an opportunity for them to really, from a very young age, to not just only think about what they need, but what the whole community needs. So I invite you to use some of these questionings, even with the younger ones. And would group 2, if we want to just keep in the sequence that was randomly assigned, would group 2 be willing to share? Or did you want to say something?
Group 2 was it was empty. So we need to move to group 3.
Okay, Felix, do you want to do this or shall I do it?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. So we were looking at how can we get more student voice into the curriculum. So we both have student councils and things like that, but it's really talking about, okay, and how does that make a difference to the learning of the students? We spent quite a lot of time looking at the process, which is really interesting. Really interesting to see from the how might we, from the can we to the we can, really looking what the capacity of our team was. So we have got as our, well, thank you, Felix, for sharing. We can give the ultimate aim was that we can give a choice of how students are assessed by asking them for input at the start of the unit. We also ran out of time. The 15 minutes flew by very, very, very rapidly. But sometimes we need to intentionally schedule, I think was what the previous group mentioned, intentionally really schedule moments in the unit planning or lesson planning stage to see when what student input can be and actually be intentional about it. So that's a little bit where we got to. It's a very short summary of a very long conversation which went in very many directions. But we enjoyed the process of looking through the three columns. Yeah, and really getting the students involved in their learning.
Thank you, Allison and Felix. Yeah, there's a lot of power in that "we can" statement. And I even imagine being a learner and seeing that statement, and how inviting that would be to say that your learning really matters because we can give kids choice and how they're assessed, and that really launches student voice in a lot of ways, and even pitching that question to them, then saying, how might we do that for you individually? So they can co-create their own responses to that beautiful opportunity to include them in their learning. And how much one of the things we see with this process is that it's quite it's almost contagious. The more we're inviting people in to come up with solutions and ideas that then they see reflected, then they get into a habit of saying, okay, so maybe we can use the protocol to look through again this lens to further refine. It might not have been perfect the first time around, so let's use that protocol to integrate different perspectives. But thank you. What a beautiful job, group 2 or group 3, breakout room 3. And now breakout room 4. Are you ready to share with us?
Andy, do you want to do this, or shall I start us off? I think we really appreciated the invitational nature of the protocol that you described there, Rachel. And we didn't come up with a visual either. But Melissa came in a little bit later, but we had a really, really good conversation with one another, the three of us. And we were talking from the perspective of the voice in the curriculum, from the perspective of the child. And some of our how might we questions that came in there started to take, we started to recognize the intercultural element of how we might be shaping the curriculum through student voice, how we might be creating a curriculum that inculcates the interests and the motivational aspect of student learning, where they're coming from and where they connect with their curriculum. And then how might we include thinking at all of our stages right the way through from early years to grade 12 with using our home languages. How might language actually, from a student perspective, be able to shape the way that we're learning. And so that moved into the can we questions of, there were some really lovely ideas Andy was about with at the end of lessons, just perhaps at the beginning it being a bit clunky, but that very quickly the metacognitive element could come in if we're just noting down in a Google Doc or in a Teams document, so what's my one takeaway from the lesson today, or how might we be able to shape that in a different way another time, so that can be analyzed and affect the assessment for learning, as it were, approach of, and how do we shape our next lesson. So there were lots of ideas that we then started coming up with in the we cans, from the can we's to the we cans, which were about student feedback at the end of sessions, ongoing feedback with student representatives, subject areas for year groups, suggestion boxes, student surveys, all sorts of student rep ideas with metacognitive and intercurricular thinking from a student perspective. So I think, and then Melissa just came out with this brilliant thing where she was saying that in her work with the students, how their student voice and choice really illustrated how the students felt that they were heard when they were asked about what the changes should be or what the developments should be, but they didn't feel so much heard in terms of the how, and that their school is really focusing now on, and how might we be looking at different assessment approaches, group work or individual work, or whatever it might be, but in terms of changing. So you can imagine that we were quite fast.
Beautiful. That was that you, Sarah, your group touched on every aspect. I don't know if any of you have seen the student voice continuum. It was, I think, originally defined by Mitra, but it's very helpful because it thinks it moves from this idea of where do I see myself, like expression? Where do I see myself represented in the school? And so we're talking about multiculturalism and where do you see your voice, moving into where am I giving feedback and seeing that feedback being used, into where do I have partnership with educators and other people to create change and that support, and then ultimately where do I have leadership to initiate change. And so Sarah, I think your group touched upon each part of that continuum and how we're thinking about integrating student agency. We need to think about all parts of it. So sometimes we can think about this issue as being so large, it can feel difficult, but even the beginnings of giving students that voice and that opportunity, even going back to the first example, to see their perspectives on the ultimate design of the playground, they start to feel invited into the process. And like that's a natural part of the expectation for their role in the school, and what a sense of belonging that creates. So thank you all. You're brilliant. And you all said that wasn't enough time. And of course it wasn't enough time. But I hope that this gives you a sense of a protocol that you could use with any of your teams, the educators. You could meet further in SIG groups to define some of these initiatives and support one another. But it really allows everyone to have an opinion and to start working through solutions. And that's what we love about it. I am going to bring us back to our slideshow. Oh, I think I hit the wrong thing, so I will stop sharing. Sorry, I'm showing my Google Meet tendencies again. I just wanted to let you understand a little bit the context of what we just did. So if we take it back to our student leadership kit, one of the things we didn't have proper time to do, and I appreciate that you all jumped in wherever you were and lent your voice to the discussion. But we know that kids in schools need a little bit more time to feel connected and safe in spaces. So the first stage of our student leadership kit is that connection and creating a safe space for everyone to feel heard and celebrated for who they are. And then we move into one of the things we hear over and over again about student leadership and student voice, and I would argue it's the same for adults, is that sometimes our systems tend to prioritize certain voices over others. And if we're really thinking about changing how student agency works in schools, we need to know that it's working for everyone, not just those we might think of traditionally as our high flyers. And so our next stage in the kit is about gathering everyone's voice and how we hear everyone's perspective and invite them into the process of co-creating a school that fits all learners. And then we move into the what needs to be done workshop. And that would take at least an hour if we gave it proper time to really walk through. And there's stages of that protocol that we didn't share with you, but we would be happy to in the future. And then we move into what we can do. And you saw some of the power of that generative brainstorming, sharing perspectives. What we love about this, when you can do this with actual students and teachers, is the kids are the ones on the ground. And they're often the ones who know what it feels like. But the teachers are the ones who have a lot of wisdom and resources. So to bring them into the same space to start to come up with solutions, it's pretty magical. And then we know that we all need work figuring out how to collaborate in a healthy way. And so our next tool is about building collaborative teams, and it's built around research of what makes an effective team, but it's playful. We have a game that kids work through to, once they get into a project group around one of these, what we can do, they start defining their roles and really thinking about their strengths and team alignment. And then we move into collaborate to co-create, because I can't tell you how many times I hear in schools that kids came up with great ideas, but they never happened, or faculty. And this allows them to get into the design process and have some communication and accountability, frankly, of getting the work done. And we're seeing exciting results from this. I'll tell you a quick story when I'm done with this. And then share our progress. And this is, you know, all the research shows how important it is to have a real audience for your work and to become advocates for what you've done. And so this is the stage where kids get to say, these are the projects we did. I'm working with a school right now, and I'm working with a group of English language learners in the school. And the teacher who was working with them was really concerned that they were just sticking to each other and they were feeling really excluded. And so I went through the student leadership process with them. And this group of kids went from thinking, we're excluded, it's hard to be in groups with other people, we don't feel like people really understand who we are, to re-envisioning their role in the community as people who understand what it feels like to be excluded. And there are other people who also might not feel a full sense of inclusion. And so they designed a couple of projects to build community in their school. One of the projects, because it's a school that doesn't have big teams, they created a soccer, or this was in the US, but a football community, both virtual and using the community park. And they invited everyone. And another group decided to build an advisory-based checkers tournament. And those ideas seem simple, but what they allowed these kids to do was to go around and recruit other kids for the groups to share. They all happen to be from Angola, so they shared the Angolan rules to checkers, and they communicated with the administration. It gave voice to this teacher who was working with them to have a clear explanation of what these kids needed for support. And so they moved from feeling like they were marginalized to feeling like they were actually stewards of the community for other kids who might not feel engaged. And that's the power of this questioning work. But I think we are close to the end of our time. We have a couple of minutes for questions. If you have any, we would love to try to answer them or even just begin the discussion.
Well, I think with the view on the timing, Rachel, I think we'll need to skip that part for now, at least. But I'm sure that everybody's going to connect with you offline if they do have a question. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to you and to Mustafa for sharing your expertise, and also to thank you for everyone for participating and for your thoughtful contributions. I think the power of small schools lies in our relationships and in our ability to adapt. And going through today's process is a great reminder of how we can leverage that to empower our students as leaders of their learning. If you'd like to continue this conversation with Rachel, I think that your website is up there now in the meantime, or you can connect with the Intentionally Small's special interest group, and we can keep sharing experiences. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again, Rachel and Mustafa. Are there any final words from you, Rachel?
I just want to thank you all for being in this space with us. It's always a little trickier virtually, and yet I really love to hear your passion for student voice, and look forward to further projects along the way.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.